I had my suspicions about my husband cheating. Desperate to calm my nerves and erase the doubt clouding my mind, I tricked my husband into thinking I was going on a business trip. On the day, I hid across from our apartment, wearing a hat pulled down to obscure my face, vigilantly keeping an eye on him. After a while, a scene unfolded before my eyes that I could hardly believe. There he was, walking hand in hand with a woman I didn't recognize. Straining to hear, there was one sentence from my husband that I could clearly make out.
I'm so happy when I'm with you.
Right after, my hand trembled as I gripped my phone, dialing my husband's number. My name is Susan. I'm a 29-year-old office worker. Her husband, William, is the same age as me, and her career dates back to her student days, a chance encounter that resembles a romance novel. Our bond, forged in academia, endured the hardships of life as we went our separate ways after graduation, and she finally married me 3 years ago. I'm finally approaching my 30s. I really wanted to have a child soon, but I didn't want to tell him. Because we were both busy with work and didn't have time. We had to work a lot of overtime, especially with William's recent transfer. As these days continued, our relationship gradually deteriorated before talking about having a child. First, we don't have much time to meet. On rare occasions, when I get home early from work, I fall asleep before William's shadow crosses the threshold. Then, one fateful night, I came home late from work to find him isolated in his bedroom, a silent sentinel. Also, I work in the tourism industry, so I work most weekends. Of course, I had to go to work during these holidays, and I also had to go on a business trip. This constant cycle of disconnection has eroded the foundations of our communication, making us strangers under the same roof. But when I returned from a business trip over the weekend, I encountered a disturbing anomaly in the fabric of my home life. When I stepped into the house, a strange sweet smell wafted through the air. That smells good. Is it just my imagination? These thoughts raced through my mind as I opened the living room door and was greeted with a sight that shocked my being. The room in front of me was clean, more like a showroom than the warm friendliness of communal living. The usual clutter that characterized our life experiences has clearly disappeared, leaving spaces feeling empty and devoid of human presence. The absence was not only physical but also emotional, the room stripped of its identity and left as an empty shell. My husband is the only one who drinks in our house, so even the trash can of empty cans, which should rarely be full, was completely emptied. As I stood there as a spectator in an almost alien landscape, a creeping realization hit me. This cleanliness is more than just tidying up. It felt like a deliberate erasure, the obliteration of evidence intended to cover up something, or someone. Upset, I ventured to the bathroom to wash off the road dust, but my suspicions only grew stronger. There, lying on the cold tile floor, was a strand of hair, its length and color a stark contrast to mine. It was tangible evidence that unraveled the illusion of normalcy and thrust me into an unexpected reality. My home, which I thought only existed in fiction, became the setting for a movie. I was a little taken aback by the thought that such a dramatic development could happen in my house, and then I calmed down. While I was away, it seemed like he had someone over at our place. Could this be a hint of him having an affair? I found myself pondering over this as I noticed he was still nestled in bed, even though it was already past noon. This late slumber possibly indicated he had a night filled with enjoyment. Engrossed in these thoughts, I began to unpack my suitcase. Soon enough, my husband, evidently annoyed by the disturbance, sluggishly woke up.
It's so loud. Can't you see I'm trying to sleep here?
He grumbled. This was the greeting I received from him after coming back from a long business trip, our first interaction after a while. My frustration was quick to surface. Sleeping? It's well into the afternoon. What exactly were you up to last night? I asked, inadvertently cornering him with my query. Despite this, he defensively shot back.
I was doing nothing special. Can I relax on my day off?
His evident nervousness prompted me to probe further. Oh, by the way, did you manage to tidy up the room? I inquired. He avoided eye contact and replied.
Doesn't it look clean? I had some spare time during the holiday, so I decided to do some extensive cleaning.
That's thoughtful of you, thank you.
No worries.
He responded, his tone betraying a hint of caution. The suspicion between us was palpable, casting a shadow over our conversation. Seeking to break the awkward silence, I shifted the topic. You didn't have to bother with the trash, though. The recycling pickup isn't until after tomorrow. Putting it out too soon might get us a talking to from the property manager. I pointed out. To my surprise, he seemed overly perturbed by the mention of recycling.
What's the big deal? It's already out, just be thankful.
He retorted. Unwilling to let it go, I persisted. Perhaps we should bring it back inside? At least until tomorrow night before we set it out. Obviously, I had no intention of following through, but I was curious about his reaction. Visibly flustered, he exclaimed.
No need for that. Taking back something that's already been thrown out is just dirty. It'll get picked up eventually, so it's fine as it is. Are you seriously making a fuss over me disposing of the trash?
Following this outburst, he retreated to the bedroom, almost as if escaping. I wondered, was there really a need for such panic over mere trash? Without even needing to verify, it was clear there was more to the story than met the eye. Clearly something was wrong. What happened was that my husband was cheating on me. I was sure of it. The dilemma of whether to confront him with evidence of his infidelity and whether to forgive or not was overwhelming. He wished he could survey 100 people about how to handle a situation like this, like a magazine feature. However, no concrete evidence was at hand. A single hair of his hair was not enough to merit a charge. I decided to wait and see what would happen. She thought that perhaps her husband felt neglected and decided to make more time for him. Maybe she was busy with work and felt lonely. His indiscretion may have been a temporary relief brought by solitude. As his wife, I believed that I was the only one who could truly support him. Her determination solidified, she talked to her boss the next day and was able to reduce her workload. I started coming home early and taking on more responsibilities around the house. No matter how late it was, I tried to stay awake until he got home. I was surprised to hear that he actually returned home a few days late and barely made it in time to catch the last train. Was the job really hard? Or were you spending time with other people? I wondered, torn between doubt and trust. After following this routine for about a week, I noticed that my son was coming home earlier. I took the plunge and asked him, "Has your work calmed down lately?"
Yeah, kind of. I guess that's what you've been up to lately. You seem to get home early, and it's unusual for you to be awake even when I'm late.
He answered. I thought it was time to prioritize my family more. I think if you're going through a tough time, you should think about your family more. I answered.
I see.
He said. That night, we had a meal together for the first time in a while and were able to catch up on each other's progress. I was really happy to hear his story. But my happiness didn't last long. My husband was very interested in my daily happenings, and I didn't really understand why, but it made me take action. I always hoped for a peaceful life. The idea of discussing children was on my mind, and I was waiting for the right moment to broach the subject. That's why I felt it was necessary to clear the air first. My only wish was to reassure myself and erase any doubts I had about her husband. I'm on a business trip this weekend. One night, I realized for the first time that I had lied to him. Due to my work, I often take a few days off on vacation, so it's rare for me to travel during this time. It was a little risky considering how many years her husband and I had been together, but he saw me off without question. I thought maybe he didn't notice anything unusual because he wasn't interested in me, but I shook off that idea and walked away.
Welcome. Please sit wherever you like.
When I chose a seat on the terrace of the cafe across from my apartment, I was greeted by a hat hanging from my bag. From this location, we had a good view of both the entrance to the apartment and the rooms on the second floor. I felt like a detective on a stakeout. My only mission was to pray that nothing out of the ordinary happened. Do you eat donuts at times like this? But this is a cafe, not a donut shop. Maybe I watch too much TV shows. I muttered to myself as I looked at the menu, and ended up ordering coffee and a sandwich. But before the sandwich arrived, my husband showed up. He came out of the apartment entrance and walked off in a direction I didn't know. I lowered my hat further. he didn't notice me at all and continued on his way. Why is he dressed so flashy? I thought to myself as my heart rate increased and I felt a premonition approaching. By the time the sandwich arrived late, I couldn't taste it at all. I just mechanically ate my sandwich and tried to calm the chaos inside me. Before I knew it, the sandwich was gone and only a sip of coffee remained. I can't stay here anymore. Where did my husband go? Should I take the plunge and go look for him? No, it would be foolish to wander aimlessly. As I drank the last drop of coffee while thinking about this, an unbelievable sight caught my eye. I choked on my coffee and couldn't stop coughing. My husband returned holding hands with a woman I didn't know. Her long, beautiful hair fluttered in the wind, creating a scene that looked like a slow-motion movie. As I watched it unfold, I was so mesmerized that I couldn't even blink an eye. Her husband and the woman were having a conversation, but the words were muffled because we were far away and out of reach. But when I focused and listened, his voice pierced through the silence, deep and clear.
Recently, Shivi been coming home early a lot, forgetting about my daily chores, and feeling lonely. I'm very happy to be with you today for the first time in a while.
When they disappeared into the apartment complex, I sat there in shock, as if time had stopped. However, this numbness was soon replaced by a surge of uncontrollable anger. Happy, he said, how can they find solace in such trifles? I'm not going to keep them satisfied. Without hesitation, I reached for my cell phone and dialed his 2 numbers with purpose. The first call connected quickly, but there was some resistance on the second call. That was as expected. He was preoccupied with himself.
What's wrong? I'm busy right now.
After several attempts, he answered in an irritated tone. Finally, the line was empty and I seized the moment. You're feeling happy now, aren't you? My question was a thinly veiled jab laced with sarcasm.
Huh. Why are you suddenly asking me that?
His confusion was obvious, growing more irritated with each word. You said you're happy, right? Well, happiness won't last long. I'll make sure you're unhappy in the end. Before I could understand his confusion, I abruptly hung up and said,
What are you talking about?
Just then, the first person I called showed up. The stage is set for my carefully planned revenge. We sneaked into their apartment with 2 powerful allies. But when I stood in front of the door, I hesitated. Is this really okay? If we keep pushing forward like this, what kind of ending will we have? Now, such fear has begun to overflow.
Don't worry, we've got your back.
She said softly, and a strong, reassuring hand rested on my shoulder, giving me the courage to reach for the doorknob. I quietly opened the door and was greeted by the same high heels that the long-haired woman had left at the door. I deliberately stepped over them and made my way to the center of the house. The moment I opened the door to the living room, the sight of 2 people toasting with canned beer and immersing themselves in a small world spread out before my eyes. So this was the secret trash he wanted to hide, beer cans. The answers swirling in my head were instantly drowned out by the voice echoing throughout the room.
What are you doing?
To this, my husband immediately reacted and shrugged his shoulders in shock.
Dad? What are you doing here? Mom too? Susan, weren't you on a business trip? What the hell is going on here?
Filled with a deep feeling of betrayal, he hurriedly opened his mouth when his eyes met the strong ally he had brought with him. That's our question. Please answer your dad's question properly.
Then answer me first. How was your business trip? Was it planned from the beginning?
A conspiracy? Does that mean you admitted to having an affair? When he heard the word infidelity, he began to look nervous.
No, it's not.
Before he could try to fabricate any more excuses, I said, That's not true. Since I was on a business trip, I thought it was a good time to bring her along, right? You said that you were happy to be able to spend time with her. You haven't been able to see her lately because I've been coming home early lately. You said you missed her.
Where did you hear that? Wait, that's why you called?
Yes, and I'm not going to let you live happily in ignorance.
That's cowardly. You were the one who lied in the first place. If you hadn't lied, none of this would have come to light and we could have continued our marriage as if nothing had happened. Everything. It's your responsibility.
But before I could refute his flawed logic, Charles' fist had already found its mark on my husband.
Apologize to Susan now.
I'm sorry.
His apology made after such vile words meant nothing to me. No matter what he said, it was clear that I would never forgive him. I want a divorce. With a mixture of surprise and determination, I declared this to myself more than anyone else.
You can't be serious.
His protests quickly escalated, but Charles desperately tried to quell them. The unfaithful woman sheds tears in such a situation. I am the one who want to cry. As I was going through this mess, the comforting embrace of Nancy brought me out of the house.
I'm really sorry. Let's talk about divorce another time. For the sake of appearance, I don't think it's a good idea to talk about it today. Please let you stay at my house.
She said it sincerely, but the weight of the situation was clear in her voice. With that, she invited me to her home and offered me a safe place in the storm. That night, I found solace in being with Nancy, a brief respite from the storm. It seems that Charles stayed at my husband's house and preached to her husband every night. Apparently, he released the cheating woman after taking a photo of her with her ID. A few days later, with the mediation of Charles and Nancy, he and I officially ended our marriage with a divorce. I sought $3,000 in damages from him and $2,000 from the woman for that betrayal. It turns out that she is a co-worker at my husband's new workplace, and soon her infidelity is discovered, and both of them are demoted to the local branch. He tearfully confessed that he was currently on a pay cut and could not pay alimony. However, I firmly refused to reduce the agreed amount. He now lives in a dilapidated apartment, works non-stop on weekends, and seems to have completely lost his will to live. Throughout this ordeal, Charles and Nancy keep me updated, apologized, and promised to always pay alimony regardless of my ex-husband's situation. For me, this was a turning point in refocusing my career and a ray of hope in a dark cloud. The lack of children in this marriage, once a possible regret, now feels like a blessing in disguise. Freed from the emotional entanglements of previous relationships, I was able to devote myself more fully to my profession. This new initiative caught the attention of my boss, who decided to consider me for a promotion. Today is a test day and a milestone day. I put on a brand new suit that I had bought especially for this day and left home with determination for my future. The road ahead is bright and full of endless possibilities.